So I have a tricky thing to think about today. I was talking in a different video about a walking garden and having trails that go up and down slope for people who want exercise. Because I get my exercise by walking around, and there are some benefits to walking uphill. And a lot of my uphill things are trails. And I noticed that, because I'm not big into gymnasiums, even though there could be a gymnasium, it's fine. It's not a moral issue. It's just one of why don't we do some work instead of being trapped in a room doing useless work that gets nothing done except, I guess, gives your body exercise. Why not chop some wood, move some dirt in a wheelbarrow, dig some stuff? We need to sculpt the land here anyway. But, and then, see, it's going to be a confusing video because if you watch enough of my videos, you're going to start to see there is kind of a method to the madness. That the train of thought that I have kind of fits together. And luckily I have the luxury of years. Well, I'll be dead, so I better get my shit together pretty quick. But I have the luxury of years of looking at a space, looking at especially the forest part of it, of crafting the biology of it. Now, of course, with more resources, I could do more stuff. But a lot of times when we do stuff and we design it too quickly, we make some pretty bad mistakes. So I have the luxury of thinking about things in a slower way, but I also want to see some of this junk get implemented, either by you or me, whoever in the world, whatever. I'm very willing to give ideas away in almost all cases. There's a few things I reserve to myself. I have software ideas I don't feel like sharing because I think they could be massively profitable. On the other hand, am I going to do them or not? So anyway, here's another free set of ideas and kind of connecting some things together. That is for a piece of land over there, which is the steepest slope in the entire property. And slope has something special. It has properties nowhere else does. Now, oftentimes you look at slope on a piece of land and you're like, well, I can't really use that land. It has too much slope. And you have to worry about things like mudslides or something, or erosion. But actually slope has immense value, especially because it doesn't have value for a bunch of other things. Does that even make sense? I don't know. But that slope has an amazing view. So slope definitely usually implies view. So above it, you can have stuff. And I'd recommend usually not putting buildings right on the edge of it. I'm about to contradict myself on that. But having it be available for public. Or having the buildings that are there be things that are available to the public. Whether they're restaurants or open air porches and spaces for people to hang out. Plazas. And so one of the thoughts I've had for a long time is having kind of a fallen down skyscraper that is along the slope. So rather than being a skyscraper that just goes up in the air and has nothing around it, certainly good for view, but I don't like that because then you have to have elevators and there's not a lot of ways in and out of it. You have to go down to the bottom. Le Corbusier, the architect, was big into skyscrapers. I don't know if he's considered the inventor of the skyscraper or not, but I don't like his designs. And there's other architects like Frank Lloyd Wright who designed suburbs and freeway interchanges and really crap that I think is now horrible. Now, was he a horrible architect? Well, he designed for the time. He designed for cars. He designed in the cultural position he was in. And I really wanted to borrow architectural concepts from cultures all over the world through all of time. And so when I imagine a fallen down skyscraper along this big long slope, it would connect the bottom to the top, and that will imply stairs. And I'm kind of against stairs for mobility reasons, so I often think of ramps. Well, we can do both. And that's not a problem. Even in a small spot I have at the top of that slope, I did a ramp, and then I have a trail that just goes direct up. And somebody visited here, and, well, they made a comment that was kind of goofy, but I thought it was fairly innovative because if you have hiking trails that are switchbacks, you'll often find a problem with people just cutting straight up the slope because they want to. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it could make it so that there's less people on a given trail. Because I also don't, in general, I don't like two-way things, like two-way roads. I don't want vehicles or people coming straight at me on something. Even on a sidewalk. I don't like that we have sidewalks where people are, running into each other constantly. It just sounds like you're always having a problem. I know of a town near me that has very narrow roads, and they don't have one-way roads, and so you're always in this game of chicken with other cars. And you have to back up, and the intersections get fucked up, and it's like, I would love it if in that town they just decided all the roads were one way. And likewise, if you have paths and trails, whether ramps or stairs, you can have one that goes up and one that goes down. And then people are generally in the same flow of traffic. Especially if you add in things like carts. You don't want carts to be like at cross purposes trying to get through places. So I love the idea of one-way transit systems. And then with the fallen down skyscraper idea, the building would actually have multiple first floors. So that all through the building, you can get out the sides of the building and get away from the building as easily as possible with the least energy needed. And that allows you to have outbuildings that serve other purposes. You're reducing the problems of city living. Because I don't want to live in a multi-story thing. And even if you look at the book, The Pattern Language, or I guess it's called A Pattern Language. Great book, classic among architects, looking at elements that are in an architectural system, and really it goes beyond architecture into town design. Really, it's a great book. You got to check it out. And in fact, with all the different thoughts I have, what I really want to do is make a new version of a pattern language that has thousands and thousands of more patterns. Like one of the patterns they have in it is alcoves. You want little alcoves in your society, places for people to kind of be out of the way in a little secret spot. Doesn't have to be secret, but it can be. So a lot of the elements I talk about and how we can fit them together get really complicated. And so I want to set up a system for doing that then we could use to design the use of a large piece of land and create a town that serves us in ways far better than we can imagine in a normal town. There's the concept of the third space, right? It's not home and it's not work. And I just read about it, and I thought it actually did not include businesses, because one of my criticisms of cities is that anywhere you go, you have to pay to be there. And then some cities have like certain plazas or parks where you don't have to pay to be, but often that's a very small percentage of the city. And I want that to be a huge percentage of the city or town. I mean, want cities to exist, really, so not as they are. It's just wrong from so many levels. I mean, you look at like year 1800, what were the biggest cities that existed? There were very few of them. I think Mexico City was a big city at one time, London. I don't know where in Asia, probably Tokyo. Certainly is now. I think it's the biggest city in the world, I'm not sure. But I don't like how cities are designed or towns are designed, because I want more third space that isn't even commercial. So I'm going to cut businesses out of my concept of what a third space is. And I want people to be in parkland, even if they're in the city, like Central Park in New York. Awesome, very famous. Well, I kind of want cities or towns to be like almost half park. And so as amazing as Central Park is, I don't think it's good enough. Of course, you shouldn't really even have New York City where it is in the form it is, because there's a great book called The World Without Us, which talks about if we all just disappeared, what would happen? And it's a thought experiment, since we won't actually disappear all at once, right? Unless you think we're all Christians and there's going to be a rapture. but that's all made up shit. And anyway, but one of the things they talked about in there was that there's pumps underneath New York that have to pump water out of the foundations of buildings to make sure that the buildings don't eventually fall down. And that what would happen in a world without us is that those skyscrapers built too close to the water line, these tall, massive structures, the pumps will eventually fail, the electrical system will fail, and then the water will gather, the base of the building will rot, corrode, become unstable, and you'll have a big pile of fallen down skyscrapers in New York City. And that's true of other cities around the world where they're just not built in the right spot for the right purposes. And it's too much energy to maintain them. And any interruption in the electrical supply will start to put them at massive risk. We shouldn't be building that way at all. So I want to make a skyscraper that's already fallen down onto the slope of the hill, giving us the kinetic energy of, for example, capturing rain at the top, and perhaps having a lot of rain capture at the top, and then that water flows through the building, so we don't have to have pumps while we do rain capture. We don't have to pump water up, because like when the electricity goes out, you lose your water supply in many cases, even in a small town I'm walking to right now. That seems like an inherent design flaw, like super messed up. Anyway, so back to the walking. See, this is how it all just connects together. It's so difficult. And I need someone organized, somebody who wants to rewrite or write something similar to a pattern language to work with me to define all these different pieces and then how they relate to each other. And we could even practice by mapping out a pattern language and seeing how that relates to this project and seeing how one pattern relates to others and how we can create groupings of patterns that fit together. Because the complexity of the shit I talk about is really tricky. Like I'm passing by a gully here, a ravine, right? How we use a ravine matters a lot. In many cases, people just dump garbage into ravines. Well, now luckily here I own both sides of the ravine down there, so I could actually put a building within the ravine that allows crossing across it, and then there's buildings on either side. Actually, one of them I probably want to make kind of a hermit area and have it be really natural. I haven't cut trees in there. It's a really pleasant area. But you could cross into it then, across this building that is dug into this ravine, which breaks some other rules about capturing sun and stuff like that. But not all buildings have to follow all the rules. In fact, you might want super cold buildings. It could be that down in there, which if you walk into this ravine, you immediately feel different. You feel the humidity down there, and in the past I've set up cuttings gardens down there where you can put cuttings directly in the ground and have them grow and never even use any pots. And then 3 years later you go in and you harvest these plants that have lived that you could not have done that up here. Now, you can actually do direct in-ground cuttings of, for example, rosemary up here. If you do it exactly the right time of year, the rosemary will put out enough roots and then it will survive. Barely. It might die. But if you do 100 of them, and you're not using any plastic, you're not watering them at all, then you're getting plants at way less labor cost per plant. And so, in this case, okay, so you got really weird buildings like the Ravine building. But we're trying to talk about walking gardens and using this massive slope that sounds so useless. And I do have to talk to a guy about, like, could I bulldoze a strip across that? Erosion is always an issue in most places. You definitely don't want to set yourself up for mudslides. But by capturing all the water above it, and making sure we route and control the water, then I don't think we'll have a problem with mudslides. Also, for the building itself, you would probably dig down to rock, because in this ravine you can see spots where, because I dug a trail in there, I paid some guys to do it, I didn't do it, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of wheelbarrows of stuff, and now it looks all natural, it's all grown over again, it looks very pleasant, and you can actually walk then into this very steep ravine. But that was like, geez, at least 4 days of work by 5 guys that are strong. So it's costly. And a bulldozer, I need a more gentle hand for that. But anyway, on this slope, I would want to probably dig down to rock. Not just bedrock. Bedrock is where the earth gets harder, if I understand correctly. But I want to get down to the big rocks, because you can see the big rocks in the ravine. And I want it to be just concreted into the stone. I want the part of the building that connects with the hill to have big rocks right there you can see, and you can see that your building is connected to the rocks. That also brings up another weird question about earthquakes, because I'm not an architect, I'm not a structural engineer. I need both of them. But I know that there's a benefit to having a building be able to move around a little bit in an earthquake, so it can kind of like be flexible. But in that kind of case, I don't really want anything moving at all. It's a fairly steep slope. And so I think I want to connect it directly to the rocks. And if you're an architect or structural engineer, you let me know how stupid that is. It could be stupid. I'm not sure. But if I can't connect to the rocks, I'm pretty sure I don't want to have a lot of buildings in there at all. Now, I'm not imagining buildings along the whole slope. I'm imagining a, 5 to 10 room wide building that goes down the slope, and then you've got interior space that all has amazing views. It gets the morning sun, so you're sucking in the morning sun, which is the most valuable because everything's really cold, right? And so that's more valuable than sunset. Anyway, back to the walking garden. All around it, then you could have stairways that go up and down that slope. Even though stereotypically I've been against stairways. I mean, like, why should you go on a Stairmaster as a gym equipment thing, a Stairmaster? Why don't you just go upstairs? And the stairs would, you'd build them and they would last forever. They don't break. You don't have to buy a new Stairmaster. You'd be outside. You could go down on ramps and up on stairs, or, and then laterally you could have, greenhouse spots to sit out of the wind and enjoy the amazing view, whether it was nighttime or daytime. You could be out of the rain. You could have spots that were out of the sun. It would just be an amazing use of what theoretically is fairly useless land. Too much slope. So that's kind of exciting for me. And then the flat land that's right above it, you would actually be able to use for, its flatness allows you to easily walk around every goddamn where. And you would use it for gardens and parks and smaller buildings and stuff like that. So you'd put your buildings in the worst spot, in a sense. A spot that can't be used for anything else, hardly. That makes sense to me. Now in here, I have slope, but it's not as extreme. And so I have some of the same issues with slope here, but not the same as that very difficult slope. Here, the slope also has eastern exposure. It's really pleasant, and I've cleared some trees in here over time and left others. But that'd be a great place for a big building up there. And then you might have also still buildings that go up and down slope where you have ramps and stairs within protected areas. That sounds pretty cool. God damn, I tire myself out talking this way. My brain goes too fast. It's really annoying. Anyway, goodbye.